If you want to play Marvel Champions, but have no idea how to build the villain deck correctly, then this video is for you. This is the first video in a series of guides aimed at players who are about to start the very first game of Marvel Champions and would rather watch a quick guide than read the rulebook. I've got you covered. But let's face it, even if you already played a couple of games, you might still be unsure how to set up a new scenario you haven't played before. If that's you, this video will help you out as well. This video is structured so you can follow my instructions step by step while setting up your very first scenario. But beyond that, you will learn how to build any scenario available in Marvel Champions. So without wasting any more time, let's go right into it. The first two decisions you have to make in any game of Marvel Champions is which identity you are playing and which villain you are going to face. Following the rules for setup, you choose your identity first. But in my opinion, it is smarter to explain how to build the deck of the villain first. So this is what we are going to do now. In the core set, you can choose between Rhino, Claw, and Ultron. Each villain is always tied to a specific scenario. Every card that belongs to the same scenario shares the same name in the bottom left of the card. Let's take Rhino as an example. If you look at the cards, there's a Rhino X of 21 in the bottom left. That means there are 21 cards in that scenario. In the core set, the scenarios are always named after the villain you are fighting. A lot of the scenarios released in expansions, that's not the case, but functionally that doesn't make any difference. We stick with Rhino and decide to fight him. That means we won't need Claw, Ultron, or any of their scenario cards for this game. Everything I'm about to explain also applies to those two scenarios and to every other scenario you can buy in expansions. The first thing we do now is split the cards into 3 piles. First, we build the villain deck. This deck contains all cards that have villain under the name. You can always easily recognize them because there are 3 of them that at first glance only differ by the Roman number in the upper right. In expansions, you might run into villains that aren't distinguished by Roman numerals, but by letters instead, like in the case of Bedrock from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. expansion. It can also happen that a scenario includes multiple different villains, like in Tower Defense, but even then, you still start by taking all the cards that say villain and forming the villain deck from them. Next, we build the main scheme deck. Those are the cards printed horizontally with main scheme under the name. They are very easy to spot because they are horizontal and double-sided. In this case, that's only the card at the break-in. If we would have chosen Ultron instead, we now would add 3 cards to the main scheme deck, since that scenario has 3 cards which are main schemes. All the remaining scenario cards form the encounter deck, but with that the encounter deck still isn't complete yet, because it doesn't stop with the cards that are fixed to the scenario. If we take a look at the first main scheme, we can find out what else we must add to the encounter deck. So let's grab the first stage of the main scheme. It should be in the main scheme deck. If you play a scenario with more than one main scheme, you can easily spot the first stage with a quick look on the upper right corner of the card. On one side it says 1A, on the other it says 1B. Since Rhino only has one main scheme, you can't really mess up here. Because in every setup you always have to build the villain deck and the main scheme deck, I recommend storing them on top of the scenario pile and never mixing them into the encounter cards. But alright, let's take a closer look at the side A of the first main scheme. In every scenario, you always find the scenario setup instructions right there. That means just from the first main scheme of any scenario, you already have all the information you need to prepare it for play. For this step, we only care about what comes after contents. Everything listed there must be followed before you move on. Contents does not tell you what's already included in the scenario, in this case, what's in those 21 Rhino cards. It tells you what you still need in order to finish building the scenario. The contents section is always structured the same way. First, you have to choose the difficulty you play. You basically have 2 difficulty options, Standard or Expert. This choice affects setup in 2 ways. Take the villain deck cards again. Even though there are 3 villain cards, in any game you only fight 2 of them. The first sentence in the contents section tells you what villain stages you face if you play Standard, and the sentence in brackets tells you what villain stages you face if you play Expert. In most cases, the following holds. If you play Standard, you fight villain 1 and villain 2. If you play Expert, you fight villain 2 and villain 3. For the 3 core set scenarios, that rule always applies. In some expansion scenarios it works a bit differently, but in those cases the first main scheme will always tell you exactly how difficulty affects setup. Let's look at some examples. In Bedrock's scenario we only have 1 villain card, so we cannot choose between more of them. But as main scheme, Bedrock is a double-sided card with one side being side A and the other being side B. If we take a look at the content section of the first stage, we can see that for Standard we play against the A side of Bedrock, and if we choose Expert we play against the B side. If we take a look at the Civil War expansion, we see that there are not only 3 stages of the villains being called leaders, but 4 instead. In Standard we play against stages 1 and 2, in Expert we play against stages 3 and 4. as you can see stated clearly on the first main scheme. But let's get back to Rhino for now. So depending on the difficulty, you either set aside Villain 3 if you play Standard or set aside Villain 1 if you play Expert. Actually, you have a third option here. I lied to you when I said that you can only choose between 2 difficulties. They're actually more than that, but only one of them impacts this stage of the setup. This is not another difficulty setting per se, than just being another way of playing the game, being called Skirmish Mode. If you choose to play Skirmish Mode, you only choose one stage of the villain, and only add that to your villain deck. You can even choose stage 3 of the villain while playing in Standard, and you can choose stage 1 of the villain while playing in Expert. Anything goes in Skirmish. Because of that, Skirmish Mode is not really a difficulty setting, but more of a way to play shorter games. No matter what you choose, you add the Standard encounter set to your encounter deck. This is the place where your encounter deck is mentioned in the content section right before the Standard set. Just like with Rhino, you can recognize the cards of the Standard set because every one of them says Standard in the bottom left. In the core set, you always play the Standard set, no matter which scenario or difficulty you play. But there are scenarios which do not add the Standard set to the encounter deck, like the scenario Wrecking Crew. But again, this is stated clearly in the content section of the first main scheme, or better said, those scenarios don't mention the Standard set at all. If you have the Hood Scenario pack or the Age of Apocalypse expansion, you also have the Standard 2 and or Standard 3 encounter sets. You can choose freely which one you add to your encounter deck. If you play Expert or if you play Skirmish Mode in 1-2, you also add the cards of the Expert deck to the encounter deck. So if you play on Expert, you still add the Standard encounter set. For this video we play Standard, so we set aside the Expert encounter set as well as Rhino 3. The next and last step is adding additional modular encounter sets. Let's just call them modules. These are encounter sets that typically don't have to be included in a scenario, but can be added to basically any scenario. Well, in most cases. In some expansion scenarios, one or more specific modules are mandatory, but in the core set that's not the case. If it ever is mandatory, it will be explicitly listed, so you can't really mess it up. For example, if we take a look at the Thanos scenario from the expansion The Mad Titan's Shadow, there you see that next to the encounter set Thanos in the standard set, you are prompted to add the module Infinity Gauntlet to your scenario as well. If a scenario has one or more mandatory modules, they will always be stated here. You might ask yourself why there are mandatory modules in the first place. Why not just include them in the scenario itself? The reason is that this way you can use them in other scenarios as well. You can add the module Infinity Gauntlet to any scenario that asks you to add one or more modules. The same cannot be said about the scenario-specific Thanos set. Those cards cannot be added to any other scenario in the game, so it makes sense to have mandatory modules for some scenarios. But Rhino doesn't require any specific module, which doesn't mean that it doesn't require you to add a scenario at all. On the main scheme, it always states you if and how many modules you must add at minimum. For Rhino, it's one module. Depending on the scenario, it can be 2 or even more. You always get to choose which models you add. In the core set, you get 5 models to choose from: Bomb Scare, Masters of Evil, Under Attack, Legions of Hydra, and the Doomsday Chair. So you need to pick one of these models and add it to the encounter deck. You can add more, there's technically no upper limit. You could even add all 5. I wouldn't recommend that for your first games though, because the game isn't really designed around that. If choosing is hard, the main scheme almost always includes a recommendation. Here, it recommends Bomb Scare. There's nothing wrong with following the recommendations at first, but don't let that limit you too much. Experimenting here can be a lot of fun. For this video though, we'll follow the recommendation and add Bomb Scare to the encounter deck. The other 4 modules go back into the box. And with that, the scenario is basically fully built. If you follow these steps, you can prepare basically any Marvel Champions scenario from now on. In our case, we should now have 3 decks. The villain deck containing Rhino 1 and Rhino 2. The main scheme deck with the Break-In. The encounter deck containing the remaining Rhino scenario cards, except Rhino 3, all cards from the standard set, and all cards from the Bomb Scare module. The only cards missing now are the obligation cards from all players who are playing this scenario. The difference between obligation cards and the other cards we've already added to the encounter deck is that which obligations you add depends on which identities you and your friends are using. Because of that, you can't just add them while you are preparing a scenario for general play. Every identity comes with at least 1 obligation card. Most come with exactly 1. You can spot them easily because they have an orange back and they say obligation under the name. All those obligation cards must be added to the encounter deck as well. As always, there are exceptions. More precisely, there's one exception, the Wrecking Crew scenario. If you are not told to add the standard set to the encounter deck, then you also don't add the obligation cards of the participating players. And with that, you are finished building the scenario, and this video comes to an end as well. Right now, these steps might seem like a lot, but with a little practice and clever card organization, you see that you can get through them pretty quickly. Whether you build your very first scenario by following this video, or you just wanted a quick refresh on how everything works, thank you for watching. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.